afternoon. Welcome everyone to another ATP Ride Report webinar session. Thanks for joining. If it is your first time joining, my name is Ashley Pallon. I oversee airline and corporate partnerships and alumni services for ATP. And today I'm really excited. We're joined by Josh Fraser. He is a pilot recruiter for Empire Airlines, and he's going to be sharing his insight on how to become a pilot with Empire. So thanks for tuning in. If any of you have joined before, you know before we get started, your microphones will be muted for the session. And if you need to communicate with us, where some of you have already found that chat box in the lower right-hand corner, feel free to do so if you need us to speak up or repeat anything. And then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for our viewer Q&A. So it looks like we already are getting some in that chat box for the Q&A, which is on the bottom center of your toolbar. So feel free to put your questions for Josh there. Now, for our poll this week, we are going to find out how many of you are interested in flying for a 135 cargo operator, which if you're on this call, should be all of you. So we're gonna go ahead and launch that polling and give you a couple seconds to go ahead and vote. It'll take a few minutes or a few seconds for you guys to see that. Okay, awesome. So it looks like we have one that should be applying with Empire in the next 6 months. Or 2, and we have quite a few of you, 30, that are interested in just learning more about Empire's operations. So we'll be sure to cover that with you today and get all your questions answered. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share those results real quick. It looks like 31 of you are in that initial phase of learning more, and 4 of you will be applying within the next 6 months. So that's great to hear. Thanks so much. And Josh, thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to learn more from you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you. So to start, can you go ahead and just tell us a little bit more about your background and how long you've been with Empire?
Absolutely. So my background's a little bit unique. I've been in aviation my entire life. So my dad was a Marine fighter pilot. So as a kid, I grew up with an absolute passion for aviation with a focus kind of on military aviation. So I joined the Marines and became a pilot myself. I started flying helicopters and eventually flew the MV-22 Osprey, which is a tilt-rotor aircraft, and had an amazing career. Retired from the Marines last summer, about 1 year ago. Prior to doing that, though, I had looked at a variety of companies and different positions or professions within the aviation industry, and had been talking to Empire Airlines. So initially, I had expected to come on as a pilot, and so I'd been in close contact with the recruiter at that time, my predecessor. And I came out here and met him for a couple days, and we talked. And in the end, when I got up from the table, I was like, I kind of want your job. That looks pretty fun. While I was in the Marines, I did a lot of manpower stuff, and I really enjoyed that. So rather than pursuing a position in the cockpit, I decided to start at first as the recruiter. So I've been doing that for, 9 months now, and absolutely enjoyed it. It's given me really tremendous insights on the commercial aviation industry, and it's been pretty neat.
Well, thank you for your service, and thanks for joining us here today. So to start, can you, since you are in recruiting at Empire, can you share with our viewers some more information just about your fleet, your hiring minimum bases, how many hours of flight time pilots can expect to log annually at Empire?
Absolutely. So I'd like to start off this topic a little bit with kind of a broad overview and then narrow it down into some of the specifics. So I would start by saying I generally describe the commercial aviation industry as having 2 sides to the same coin. And that is, you generally have the passenger side of the commercial aviation industry, and you have the cargo side. Now, there's some other smaller ones in there as well, but when we're talking about regional airlines and major airlines, that pretty much sums it up. Now, that said, those 2 sides of the coin are 180 degrees different from one another. They really are. So we fall on the cargo side of the industry. Generally speaking, doing a quick comparison on the passenger side of the industry, let's say from most of your perspectives that you are working your way up to a regional airline, maybe with aspirations of eventually getting on with a major airline, right? So you can kind of expect that as you get on with, let's say, a passenger airline, so one of the regionals, that You'll be flying a lot, right? Generally speaking, some of those key characteristics of that side of the industry is that you will spend a lot of time on the road, usually 5 or 6 days in a hotel. Money tends to not be real great in the beginning, right? You have to work your way up, and that's just kind of a price you have to pay a little bit as you gain seniority. But you have the opportunity to earn a lot of hours. So generally speaking, on the passenger side, in the regional airlines, a pilot can expect to accrue between 500 and 900 hours per year, right? And then you have the other side of the industry, which is almost 180 degrees different, as I explained. So that's where we fall. Now, we, as Empire Airlines, and I'll explain some of our partnerships and what we do here in a moment, but by the nature of being generally a cargo airline, right, we do out and ins for FedEx, where we pick up cargo and drop off cargo. So we don't do the same number of legs that a passenger airline would do. As a result, we only fly a fraction of the hours. So generally 300 to 350 hours per year, right? Which, depending on what your goals or your objectives are, may be a factor in your decision-making process and deciding what path to pursue. On the other hand, you generally sleep in your own bed every night. And we are also at the top of the regional pay scale. So we have folks come over from other regionals that get a $9,000 or $10,000 raise when they start with us. And so the pay is good and the lifestyle is fantastic. And of course, you get to fly some fantastic aircraft as well. We are both Part 121 and Part 135, which I'll get into. I would say that about half of our applicants come from, schools like ATP Flight School or other aviation programs, or as CFIs coming up through a flight school in various parts of the country. The other half, I would say, come from some of the regional airlines. So I'll get a call and from another pilot, and he'll say, Josh, I'm over here at such and such regional airline. And I have a wife and a 10-month-old daughter, and I'm home, maybe 1 or 2 days per week at the most. My priorities have changed, and I'm interested in coming on to the cargo side of the industry. So, so a lot of times people gravitate to the passenger side because that's what we know growing up, right? We fly in the aircraft. They're beautiful planes. We dream of being in the cockpit. And a lot of times people don't give a whole lot of thought to the cargo side of the industry. As you can see, well, we'll get into it more later with regards to COVID, but the passenger side is pretty volatile, and again, kind of the opposite side, the cargo side is really stable. So we've been virtually unaffected by the COVID crisis and the economic cycles and so forth. But we can cover that a little bit later. Now that said, with Empire Airlines, I'll give you just a quick history. So we started in 1977 here in Idaho. So I'm sitting in beautiful Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, God's country up here. It's surrounded by mountains and lakes and rivers, and absolutely beautiful. Because the company started here, our headquarters is here. But we are FedEx feeder. So initially, from 1977 to about 1987, we did a variety of things: passenger service operations, firefighting, tours, hunting expeditions, all kinds of things. In 1977, we partnered with FedEx and 1 year later became an official FedEx feeder, which means we're a regional for FedEx, right? So we've been doing that for going on 33 years now, and it's fantastic. They're an outstanding partner. Of course, they are, perhaps the premier air carrier in the commercial aviation industry. Now, that constitutes about 2/3 of our operations. There are 8 FedEx feeders within the country, of which we are the largest. So our region is the western half of the U.S., from the Dakotas down to Texas, all the way out to California, and up through the Pacific Northwest to Alaska. So within that western half of the U.S., in Alaska, we've got 18 bases, one of which is our corporate headquarters and our heavy maintenance facility here in Coeur d'Alene. But the other 17 are all operational bases. And from those operational bases, we service over 40 cities. Now, our niche is overnight packages. So when you receive an overnight package, that's usually us. We fly into the cities, drop off and pick up cargo. Now, of those 17 bases, roughly 1/3 of them are only ATRs, which is the aircraft on the screen behind me, a twin-engine turboprop aircraft, a beautiful plane. We have the ATR 42 and the ATR 72. They're essentially the same aircraft. The 42 is slightly shorter. The 72 is an extended version of the same aircraft. And then we also have the Cessna Caravan, the Cessna 208, which is an outstanding plane. So we have those three aircraft. Now, of our bases, about 1/3 of them are only ATRs. About 1/3 of our bases are only Caravans. And then about 1/3 of our bases are both ATRs and Caravans. And then on top of that, the bases vary in size slightly as well, based on the level of operations that we do at each location. And when we direct hire pilots to those bases. Essentially, you live and work in that location. So that's a little bit about that side of our operations. We're also partnered with Hawaiian Airlines, where we provide the regional passenger service out in Hawaii, known as Ohana by Hawaiian, and that constitutes about 1/3 of our operations, which we can get into a little bit later. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us, our history, cargo side of the industry, kind of the lifestyle being the key, great pay, and of course we have pathway and flow through programs to both of our partners as well.
And now, since you had mentioned that there's two different sides of the operation, and Tobias, thanks for letting me know. I think it was because it was a PDF that I had pulled up that it wasn't showing properly. But can you just speak to the hiring minimums? I know most of the people on this call had indicated they're a little bit lower on time. So maybe for first officers on both the Empire side and then the Ohana side, which you recently had actually a position posted. It just closed this morning for Ohana. So that's really exciting to hear the hiring update.
Right. So our hiring minimums are the ATP minimums. So for example, now that's as a Part 121 first officer, right? So that would be a first officer in the ATR. Our ATRs are Part 121, and our Cessna Caravans are our Part 135 operations. So for the first officer, you have to yeah, there we go. We got it listed. You've got to have an ATP with an MEL rating, 1,500 hours of total time, 250 hours of PIC time, a minimum of 50 hours of MEL time, and IFR current and proficient in a second-class medical. Now, we do accept restricted ATPs. We know that various aviation programs and military pilots are eligible for restricted ATPs, so we certainly accept that. In the past, we would also accept pilots who did not yet have their ATP, and we would pay for them to do that in exchange for a 12-month signing contract with us, and it was a win-win all the way around. Now, the COVID crisis has changed the landscape a little bit, which I'll get to here in a little bit, but I would say that now there are fewer companies, probably Empire too, that are less likely to pay for that ATP, unfortunately, just because there are so many people out there now that have their ATPs that are highly qualified. Now, so what Ashley's posted there on the screen are our minimums. Our captain minimums are slightly lower. There, you've got to have a commercial pilot's license with an instrument rating, right? Single engine land, 1,200 hours of total time, 800 PIC, 500 cross country, 100 night hours, 75 IFR, 50 of which means must be actual. That doesn't mean it has to be an IMC. That means they've got to be in the aircraft, and 25 can be in a simulator, just to be clear on that. That doesn't mean IMC. And then, of course, being current and proficient. Now, the key thing to note here is that those are the hiring minimums. So when I look at applicants for a particular position that we've posted online, and the very first thing that I look at is whether or not they have the hours. They've met the minimums there. Now, after that, then I look at a variety of things, and this is really key here. Is that so obviously the first step is meeting the minimums to be eligible. After that, I'm going to look at each pilot individually and take somewhat of a holistic approach, because there are 1,000 ways to get from point A to point B or point C, right? So the next thing I'm going to look at is what is the quality of your flight time. So you may have one applicant may have more hours than the other, but quality of flight time is really important. So for example, usually what I'll encourage is that naturally most people get their CFI and they build hours that way, right? And that's great in getting the check in the box with regards to meeting those minimums. However, that is really overall generally low quality flight time. And the reason I say that is because you're going to be doing laps in the pattern on a beautiful sunny day with an elementary type of student, and you're accruing the hours, and that's fantastic. But in the end, there are some better ways to get really quality flight time. For example, I'll often encourage folks to get the requisite number of hours as a CFI to where maybe they can get on with a charter. So now you get on with a charter, maybe you can accrue some multi-engine time perhaps, which is valuable, right? You're also flying a lot more cross country. So you're going you're getting exposed to a bunch of different airfields, different airspace. You're spending a lot of time in the IFR structure, which is really important because all of our pilots spend all their time in the IFR structure. So you're becoming comfortable and proficient with that. You're in a professional cockpit, so you're building CRM, right, which is obviously extremely important. And then maybe you're dealing with passengers, cargo, you're meeting timelines. So you can start to see that there are different ways to accrue hours that make you more marketable. Now it's going to be you're going to get those hours at a slower rate than you would doing laps in the pattern on a beautiful sunny day. However, I would take somebody who has some charter experience over somebody who has twice as many hours as a CFI. So those are some things to consider. It's not an option for everybody. Our chief pilot did the CFI route all the way to the regionals. So it's certainly, it's not a showstopper by any means. But when it comes down to when I receive 100 applicants for one position, for example, like I said, I make sure that they're qualified. Then I take a look at what their background experience is. So the quality of their flight experience is really, really important to me. And then continuing on with that, I will look at your training record. So have you had many training failures? I will tell you that as a military pilot, and I think my civilian contemporaries agree with me that while many people dream of being pilots, not everybody unfortunately has the chemistry, right, to be a pilot. And we've probably seen a little bit of this. You guys have probably witnessed a little bit. Unfortunately, a person's passion for aviation doesn't always translate to the skills and kind of the chemistry to really be a good, successful long-term pilot. One of the indications that we get are training failures, right? So we take a look at that. Now, the majority of applicants that I look at have a training failure, sometimes two. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't understand the seriousness of training failures in the potential for it to close doors for you. Oftentimes, if you have multiple training failures, you can get on with a regional, but you may be limited there. A lot of the majors, may close the door on you if you have training failures. One or two training failures may be it for you. And so the reason I bring this up is that I emphasize that when you're preparing for your check rides or your exams, make sure that you go in 100% ready. Make sure you've got plenty of rest and all those things that Ashley's probably talked about in the past, because it really does matter. Last thing you want to do is ball up a test or a check ride and potentially have that affect you down the road. So I look a little of that. I look at your job history as well. So, if somebody bounces around a lot, that can be a red flag to me. It indicates that maybe there's a personality problem, or maybe there's a flight proficiency issue, or they're non-committal. So I like to see somebody that's been at a job for a year or two, been with a company. So maybe they get on with a charter or an instructing company, like a flight school for a year or two. I like to see that there's some staying power with that person. And then there's a variety of other things as well, bonuses like, have they got an aviation degree, an associate's or a bachelor's degree in aviation? That's obviously a plus. There are a variety of things. Personality is really important to us. So we're a small company. Personality matters. We take pride in our culture here. We're not a big airline where you have a ton of throughput, where employees are numbers. For us, you're on a first name basis with the CEO on down. So personality matters as well. So you take this and a variety of other factors together and to create a holistic approach for a pilot. And that's kind of how we sort through the application. So when I kind of make an A, B, and C stack, if you will, of applications, right? The A stack are the people that meet a lot of the criteria that I just talked about. B and C are sort of the alternates, but generally speaking, I hire out of that B stack. And that's kind of the process. So another thing too is that a person may have a lot of hours, but be short in some of those other factors I mentioned. I would rather take somebody that's a little bit lower on the hours on the flight time, but meets those other criteria that I'd mentioned, over somebody who just has a lot of flight time. So that's maybe that provides a little bit of hope for you, that the path that you take matters. So that was kind of a long explanation to a relatively short question, but I think it's important. I want people to know that there are multiple paths to get there, and how you get there matters. Quality flight time over quantity is significant.
And you guys can see, if you are, a student or an instructor with us, some of the different criteria that Josh talked about. That's part of the reason, we take that into account when designing your program, because you do get that multi-engine experience. You do get that crew cross-country experience that allows you to gain that knowledge and skill and experience to have that CRM with another pilot. So that gives you exposure to help set you up for these scenarios in the future, to prepare you for interviews and for potential opportunities.
And I'll throw out too that as a CFI, I pay attention to where they worked. To be honest with you, if you're a CFI with a company that has a great reputation like ATP, that matters to me. And there are other aviation programs out there as well. So it's a matter of putting little asterisks next to people's names as I'm sorting through applications. So like I said, there are 1,000 ways to get there.
Thank you. Well, I know that you had talked about FedEx and being a FedEx feeder. So can you speak a little bit about the Purple Runway Pathway Program and the fact that pilots are able to take advantage of a clear pathway to build their skills and their qualifications to advance FedEx through that, and maybe some information on just when an Empire pilot can apply, when they're able to actually enter the program, and the criteria to meet to all of the qualifications to be able to progress.
Absolutely. So once again, I'm going to start big and work my way small. Okay. Now, first, I'm going to explain that there are you have pathway programs and you have flow-through programs, and everybody may not be familiar with the differences. So a pathway program is essentially a program where you work with us for a certain period of time, and then and you get into the program, and after which time we guarantee you an interview with a respective company, right? In this case, FedEx. And there's a bunch of training and so forth, other things that are beneficial that I'll get to here in just a moment. Now, a flow-through program is a little bit different. We have a flow-through program with Hawaiian Airlines, and the way that works is a flow-through program. You essentially apply on the front end. So you go through the interview process with us, and then subsequently apply at Hawaiian Airlines for the program. And after which time, if you're accepted into the program, there are no subsequent interviews. You do 24 months with us as one of our Ohana pilots. You flow into their training program and into their cockpit, so there are no subsequent interviews. So those are the differences between a pathway program and a flow-through program. Now, starting big, I always say that when you're deciding where you want to be, you want to, just like when you're doing flight planning, you want to be deliberate in your career planning, right? So the best way to do that, in my opinion, is that you look long-term at where you want to be. So is there a particular major airline, if that's your kind of long-term goal and aspiration to be the major airline, which one is it? And you can use a variety of criteria. So, what are their domiciles? Maybe what geographic locations are a priority to you. So what are their domiciles? Keeping in mind that some of the domiciles are senior and some are junior. So what domicile do you aspire to be at? What type of aircraft do they fly? What is the corporate culture within that company? What are the pay and benefits look like? There are a whole variety of things to take a look at where you want to be in the long term. So you do that assessment. You kind of, from there, you do the backward planning. So then you say, okay, for that major airline, there are generally one or more regional airlines that feed in there that have a program like a pathway program or a flow-through program that are feeders for that major. So using the same criteria, you determine, okay, which one of those regional airlines do I want to do I want to use as my pathway to get to my major? And use that same criteria because remember, regionals have the various domiciles and different types of aircraft, and corporate culture is very important, and all those things. And then you continue on. So you can say, okay, where am I at now? Maybe I want to go to a charter. Maybe I want to stay instructing at a school or whatever. What is my pathway to get there? So I always recommend doing the pathway program because you want to be as direct as possible. You don't want to take the circuitous route, to get to your final destination. Now, the beauty is that we have, like Ashley mentioned, the Purple One-Way program, which is a pathway program to FedEx. And we also have that flow-through program, which we'll get to later, to Hawaiian Airlines. Now, the pathway program is pretty awesome. As we mentioned earlier, the FedEx is the premier air carrier out there for a variety of reasons. I mean, they are, I think, the most sought after company out there. That said, there are a lot of people that are showing up at their door in essentially a mosh pit of pilots, right? Elbowing their way up to the door, trying to get an interview with FedEx, and the vast majority of them never get it because it's very competitive. Now, the Purple Runway program is the only pathway to FedEx, right? And of all of the FedEx feeders, only two of us have this program. So it's us, Empire Airlines, which operate on the western half of the U.S., and then you have Mountain Air Cargo, which operates on the eastern half of the U.S. Now, I would say that the Purple Runway program is your best bid for success in getting into FedEx. Now, there are a bunch of ways to get in there, and I don't know what the percentages are for people, taking other routes. The Purple Pathway program, Purple Runway Pathway program is really new. It's a tongue twister, so practice it. I think it's about a year old at this point. So we're still kind of collecting data on, the success of the program. But the key is that the way this program works is first you get hired by the respective feeder, so us or Mountain Air Cargo, right? So you get hired by Empire, after which time you can get into the program. Program eligibility, right there, that's perfect. So if you look at that, you have to be employed by us for 6 months. That gives you time to complete your IOE and all those things, and then you get into the program. Now, there's a lot of basic common sense stuff here. Obviously, to be a Part 121 captain, eventually you have to be able to have first class medical. So you need to be able to hold a first class medical. Not a problem for most of us. Stable employment history. Now, FedEx requires eventually a 4-year degree with at least a 2.5 GPA. So as a result, the eligibility requirements are that you have at least a 2-year degree with 2.5 GPA or higher. And then upon completion, which we'll get to in just a moment, you can see there at the bottom of the screen, part of the completion requirements is that you have that 4-year degree with a 2.5 GPA. So essentially, it's pretty easy to get into the program. While you're in the program, FedEx creates a profile for you that they review every 6 months. So the goal then is to remain a pilot in good standing. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons that this program is so beneficial is that now you're essentially a FedEx feeder pilot. You're flying FedEx aircraft every day. You're building that multi-engine time. You're flying their packages. You're maintaining, building and maintaining your reputation. They review your profile every 6 months. You become on a first name basis with a hiring manager, which is beneficial. They send you to a series of training as well, to include the jet transition course, to prepare you for your transition to FedEx and for your interview. So lots going on, and you can see how this could provide you with a tremendous benefit over those other pilots that are in that mosh pit, elbowing each other up to try to get an interview with FedEx. So now the program completion requirements that are in front of you there, obviously remaining a pilot in good standing. Now we have a minimum of 36 months, so 3 years that you have to fly with Empire. Now the caveat with that is that there's also a flight hour minimum. So that timeline could change depending on where you as an applicant comes in. It could actually be up to 5 years, believe it or not, just depending on where you stand in your flight hours and so forth. So minimum of 500 hours as a PIC. That means as a captain. Now, if we're flying 350 hours per year, that's going to be, a year and a half or 2 years as a captain. That means that it may take you 3 years to upgrade, and then, another year and a half before you, to accrue those 500 hours of PIC time in the ATR. prior to your interview. So the timeline can vary. It's a little bit of a long haul, you know, which is one of the things that's a little bit discouraging about this program. But to be honest with you, it's not much different than other pilots who try to get up there, because the majority of pilots that go to FedEx obviously go through a regional airline, and they're, you know, spending time a couple of years as a first officer and a couple of years as a captain anyway, prior to knocking on FedEx's door. So in the end, my opinion is that this is the best. This provides you the best bid for success in getting into the program. So overall it's a great program, and we've had a handful of pilots go through that program as well. So
now, with being part of FedEx, are you guys taking part? I know that FedEx mentioned for some of their regional carriers that they're taking delivery of the Sky Courier, the 408, and the ATR 72-600 Foxtrot.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. And what it did was kind of remind me that we not only have the ATR, but we also have the Cessna Caravan, right? I mentioned that about a third of our bases have the Cessna Caravan, which is an amazing plane. A lot of people come to us just because they want to fly the Cessna Caravan, because it is such a neat airplane. So capable, really an all-weather aircraft. It's out there flying when nobody else can. The caveat to that is that it's a single piloted aircraft, so pilots who come to us need to be comfortable flying single piloted in the IFR structure, in IMC, potentially with icing, you know, flying, you know, instrument approaches and popping out at MINs with terrain in the vicinity. So I don't mean to scare you off, but it's an extremely capable aircraft, requires a pilot who's comfortable flying on his own and that kind of thing. But it's really, really a neat airplane. Now, and the reason I mention that is that it's got a long and illustrious history, obviously. Cessna is coming out with the Cessna 408 Sky Courier, which which will eventually replace the 208 for us. So take a look it up. They just did some testing for it. There's some videos of it online that are readily available. Really neat aircraft, and it's a twin engine aircraft. So it's kind of like a you know, a larger version of the Cessna Caravan. Boxy, you can actually take containers on that aircraft. Like I said, it's multi-engine, which is nice. Not only are, you know, from a pilot's perspective of having redundancy with regards to power, but it also has, you have the opportunity to accrue multi-engine time, because some of our pilots will come in as Caravan pilots, transition to the ATR, and continue on to FedEx. So that's it. Currently, we don't have a way to build hours for people who are on the lower end of the hourly scale, unfortunately. So we would like to be able to do that. Once we receive the Sky Courier, we'll have that option. So currently, the Cessna Caravan, while it has 2 pilot seats, it only has instrumentation on one side. It's configured for one pilot. So there's legally, you cannot accrue hours that way. So we can't offer that to people, unfortunately. So that's you know, that'll change once we receive the Sky Courier. As we receive those from FedEx, they will go to, we're speculating, but we anticipate they'll probably start off in Alaska or the Seattle area, where they're, you know, they experience some overwater time or that kind of thing. So having the multi-engine capability is beneficial. So, yeah, thanks for asking about that.
Thank you for sharing that insight. And so in addition to flying some of the cargo feeder operations, you actually also do some passenger operations under Ohana or by Hawaiian. Can you maybe talk about a little bit about how that operation just differs and speak to that path to Hawaiian there?
Absolutely. I'm glad you bring that up. Hawaiian Airlines is also an outstanding partner. Really a great company. Now, you know, my last 3.5 years in the Marines, I was stationed out at Kaneohe Bay Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii. So I had the privilege of being stationed out there. The Hawaiian Islands is amazing. So when you live out there, it's a little different than traveling out there. It's, you know, what's unique about Hawaiian Airlines is really they are sort of an ambassador, if you will, for the Hawaiian culture. Keep in mind that, you know, Hawaii is, it's geographically remote. It's 2,500 nautical miles southwest of California. It's out there in the Pacific Ocean, about a third of the way to Asia. It's the most geographically remote island chain in the world. It's probably the most beautiful. And of course, it has its own, Polynesian culture, the Hawaiian culture that is absolutely incredible. Living out there, you get exposed to what they call the aloha culture, which is the culture of hospitality. There's kindness. There are just so many positive aspects of it. So to live in a beautiful place and to fly in such a beautiful place and be surrounded by the aloha culture is really an incredible thing. Now, in our partnership with Hawaiian Airlines, we provide the regional passenger service, the 121 passenger service throughout the Hawaiian Island chain, right? So we currently have 4 ATR 42s out there, and we have 3 ATR 72s. We fly both passengers and cargo within the Hawaiian Islands, all under the brand of Ohana. Now, our goal is that when passengers, when tourists or customers come to Hawaii, they fly in on Hawaiian Airlines aircraft. They step off of the aircraft and they step onto one of our ATRs at Ohana, and to fly to Maui or Kauai or the Big Island or whatever. But when they step on that aircraft, our goal is that it's a seamless transition. That there's, in their mind, it is the same company as Hawaiian Airlines, who takes tremendous pride, obviously, in being ambassadors of aloha culture. We hope that is the same experience with us. We want, in their mind, we want them to think that it's the same exact culture. So we strive for that. And of course, what's very unique about that side of our operations is that it's very similar to our FedEx feeder operations, believe it or not. So earlier I described, generally speaking, passenger operations, right, as part of the commercial aviation industry, and some of the characteristics that it entails. Here in the mainland, when you're flying around, like I said, you spend a lot of time in the hotel and a lot of time away from home and that kind of thing. What's unique about our operations in Hawaii is that that we are based out of Honolulu International Airport. So all of our pilots and flight attendants and mechanics and everybody are based in Honolulu, right? So we live on Oahu, the island of Oahu. That means that as you climb into the cockpit, you go out and fly throughout the island, you use 6 to 8 legs per day. You, at the end of your shift, will land back in Honolulu, go home and eat dinner with your family or whatever, sleep in your own bed. So you are not on the road. You're sleeping in your own bed every night. You get to fly throughout the Hawaiian Islands, which in itself is quite the experience. And there are some pretty exciting airports out there, short runways, coming in through terrain, flying past waterfalls and things like that. So pretty neat thing. Now we have both passenger and cargo operations, as I mentioned. So we have the ATR 72, which is the extended version of the 42. Now it's hollow on the inside. It has a large cargo door, and it takes the cargo containers. We have a variety of contracts out there where we fly cargo throughout the Hawaiian Islands. It's a big job for us. In other words, it provides us with a lot of work, and it's awesome. Some of our contracts include flying U.S. Postal Service mail throughout the islands, and a pilot would expect to fly both. So you will be qualified in both the ATR 42 and 72. One day you might fly passengers, the next day you're flying cargo, and our folks love flying cargo as well. And out there, what's unique with Ohana is that we are integrated into the Hawaiian culture out there. Obviously, our pilots live out there. They don't commute. They live on Oahu. But also, the majority of our passengers, over 50% of our passengers, are locals, are islanders that are traveling between the islands. So they depend on us, right, for cargo and for traveling and that kind of thing. So it's neat to have that relationship with the local Hawaiians. Now, similar to our FedEx feeder operations, our pilots don't do a lot of hours out there by the nature of the flying that we do throughout the islands. As you can imagine, you're kind of up and down. So about the time you're leveling off, take off out of Oahu and you're leveling off, now you begin your descent into Maui. So you spend a little more time on the deck than you do in the air, which means that our pilots also accrue about 300 to 350 hours per year. So a little on the lower end. In the end, I say, that doesn't necessarily matter. It depends on what your objectives are. We have the pathway program, the flow through program. So we still have, methods to get to the majors. If you think that building a lot of hours to get to the majors is important to you, that may not necessarily be the case. But that's a little bit about our operations in Hawaii. So it's pretty neat. Something we take pride in, and we love being partnered with Hawaiian Airlines. Fantastic company.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to talking now a little bit about how coronavirus or COVID-19 has has impacted your operations. So obviously it's changed, not as much as with the airlines, the landscape, but can you maybe share a pilot hiring outlook, and if someone's interested in pursuing employment with Empire or Ohana, are there, other than the minimums that we discussed before, do you have more competitive hiring minimums given the current environment?
That's a very good question. That one's actually a little bit difficult for me to answer, specifically as it pertains to what I'm looking for. But I'll give you a little bit of insight here in a moment. But as far as the landscape, and I'm sure it's kind of forefront on everybody's minds here, is how are you going to be affected by what has happened with the not only the COVID-19 crisis, but also its effects on the economy. You have that normal sine wave of the economy, right? We talked about the passenger side of the industry being very volatile. Just several months ago, I think the commercial aviation industry had the brightest outlook that it has ever experienced in history, right? And unfortunately, it turned overnight, and it's kind of shocking. So there's a tremendous throughput of people into the industry to replace all of the baby boomers who are retiring at a rapid rate. As you're probably familiar, pilots are required within the Part 121 operations. Pilots are required to retire at the age of 65. So they're retiring at a rapid rate. There's a massive sort of sucking sound as people are coming in the other end, and it's been a great opportunity for people who aspire to be pilots. Unfortunately, now the way COVID has affected everything has impacted the passenger side of the industry. And everything came to a screeching halt. And what that meant was several regional airlines have folded, as you're probably aware. And now we're anticipating widespread furloughs on the regional and major airline levels. And so as a result, the industry has been flooded with highly qualified pilots, guys who have a lot of Part 121 experience, flying for other regionals. And so it's really made it significantly more competitive for those of us who are kind of getting into the industry, right? And it's pretty discouraging. So that's kind of where we stand right now. And I sort of see three tiers of applicants, just generally speaking. The first tier being those 121 pilots. We know that once the industry starts to rebound, that those furloughed pilots are going to be sought after. So they have right of refusal. So once companies start hiring, they're going to pull back those furloughed pilots. They're also going to fill other locations within the industry. And then kind of tier two, I consider folks that have a lot of that charter experience that we've talked about, and maybe some military pilots that come out having flown various aircraft. Things like that. And then tier three tend to be a lot of times guys coming straight out of school who are just maybe working toward their MINs right now that are going to have probably the most difficult time. The timeline on the recovery of the industry is kind of out there. Everybody has their own opinion. I've heard it 3 to 5 years you commonly hear. I personally am a little bit more optimistic than that, but really ultimately it depends on kind of how the economy recovers and how the operations rebound. Now, as it pertains to pilots applying for particular jobs, now the competition's fiercer, as we mentioned. Having your ATP will help. Where like I said before, companies used to be able to pay for that. Now there are going to be fewer that are willing to, because there are a lot of applicants that already have that and some experience and things like that. So the goal here is to make yourself as competitive or as marketable as possible. There are a variety of ways to do that. We talked about some of them earlier. But in the end, just because the market is flooded with a whole lot of people. So for example, we just had positions open in Hawaii. We've closed that hiring window. It's been open a week. We got a tsunami of applicants, and our hiring team's going through those right now. But to be honest with you, the majority aren't the people we're looking for. Now we've got, believe it or not, first officers that are on 777s and 747s and things that we think would make them kind of the cream of the crop. But in reality, that's not necessarily the niche we're looking for. We're looking for folks that are regional type pilots. Maybe they have turboprop experience. they're flexible, willing to move. You know, moving to Hawaii is a big deal. It's a big muscle movement. We talked about its geographic isolation. I mean, there are a variety of factors that go into how we sort of determine that aperture of pilots that we're looking for. And the majority of the people out there that are flooding the market are not necessarily aligned with what we're looking for. And we're looking for pilots who are ready to grow as well. So to be honest with you, even though there are a lot of qualified pilots out there, we kind of look for some that are a little bit on the slightly lower side, that have some of the experience. We're talking about some recent maybe twin engine, multi-engine, maybe turboprop time and things like that. So if there's a glimmer of hope, I offer that to you. That don't be totally discouraged by what the market looks like. Just do your best on your test. Try to give yourself some good flight experience and stay at it, because it'll recover.
Guys,
The baby boomers are still getting out. So, and that's one of the factors that I take into consideration with regards to recovery, is that those baby boomers are still retiring at a rapid rate, and that's going to have an effect in our recovery as well. So.
For sure, and we're even seeing, I know that, and some of you have probably monitored this also, just the TSA passenger throughput is now, yesterday was the first time it exceeded 500,000 travelers. So we are seeing that as some of these stay-at-home orders are lifted, that people are wanting to get out after, being at home for a couple of months, especially those of you that are in New York. I know that you can sympathize.
Right.
I'm in New Jersey, we're ready to travel.
Exactly.
I did actually read recently a quote from your president, and he mentioned that in past this was actually, the hiring was a little bit of a limiting factor to expanding to new markets. So do you feel that this maybe gives Empire the opportunity to grow and increase your routes and your reach as far as market?
Very good question. Now, as a FedEx feeder, a partner with FedEx, so when we're talking about specifically the FedEx side, they determine the route. So really, ultimately, where we fly, the routes aren't changed very often, and like I said, there are 8 FedEx feeders. So FedEx makes a determination of how the routes are sort of spread out. So it's hard to say in that regard. Now, our company, I feel very fortunate to have to be with Empire Airlines. We talked about the resiliency of the cargo side of the industry. Our operations have remained the same or increased in many cases. We're still flying cargo. Our pilots are flying their butts off, so they're busy. And even on Hawaii, we weren't hit that hard at Ohana, despite being a passenger operator out there, because of the cargo operations we do and the special niche we have in Hawaii. So, if we didn't lay anybody off, all of our pilots are still flying every day. It's a great outlook, and this company is very fiscally responsible. We have zero debt. Believe it or not, even though we're the largest FedEx feeder in the country and we have the Ohana operations, and we cover the western half of the U.S. plus Alaska and Hawaii, it seems we'd be a big company. We're not. We've actually only got 400 employees, believe it or not, 150 of whom are pilots. So we have about 100 pilots in our FedEx feeder network, 50 pilots out in our Ohana network, and the remainder are employees, and to include a lot of A&P mechanics and so forth at our various bases. Now, we also have Empire Unmanned, which is a new kind of up and rising division within our company that provides UAS operations. And it's been there for a while. We've done a lot of UAS operations in support of agriculture, mining, firefighting. So during the fire season, we put UAVs or drones up high to monitor the fire, and great for command and control of fire operations on the ground. And now we're looking at operations overseas as well. So we're negotiating with companies overseas to provide monitoring infrastructure, security, and things of that nature. But our goal is to get into kind of beyond line of sight. So UAVs, the larger side of the UAS industry, over the horizon, beyond line of sight operations, not necessarily just small drones. But there's room for growth, and we will continue hiring as positions become available. We post them on our website. That's the best place to find them and to apply. So we always recommend monitoring the website. When you see something, go ahead and apply. If you have questions, our email's available there as well. employment@empire-airlines.com. Send your questions, and we're happy to answer them as well.
Thank you. And so can you maybe walk us through, I know that you said that operations overall, that haven't changed as far as you're still having that demand. Have you had any changes to maybe just the procedures that you implement, or the schedules with regard to maybe sanitary precautions or things? I know flying boxes, that's not, as big, at least on the Empire side. You are not having as much contact, but
Yeah, right, exactly. So we've come up with or utilized CDC procedures to ensure that everything's sanitized. The cockpits, extra measures to sanitize the cabins, our interactions with ground crews and things of that nature. So to keep us safe, and knock on wood, we haven't had a single case of COVID in our company, despite the fact that we're geographically dispersed across those 19 bases. So it's working, and it hasn't. On the FedEx feeder side, it hasn't affected our scheduling. We're still flying cargo. And meeting those schedules, that the high demands by FedEx. On the passenger side, our passenger operations dropped off by about, I think, 50% or more, but we augmented them with cargo operations. There was a greater demand for cargo operations, so all of our pilots continue to fly now. As the industry, or as the operations out in Hawaii are rebounding, we're slowly adding more pilots. So we were actually a couple pilots short, or a handful of pilots short out in Hawaii. So we were sort of right-sized for the COVID crisis. Now that we're recovering, our cargo operations are increased. We're adding some additional cargo lines out there. We're hiring some more pilots. So right now, in the near term, over the next 2 months, we will anticipate hiring 8 pilots, so 4 captains and 4 first officers. And shortly thereafter, I anticipate that we'll open the window again for more pilots out there. In the meantime, we continue to hire for our FedEx feeder side. Whenever a position becomes available, we post it on our website. Now, I will say that with the way that the landscape has changed due to COVID and impacts on the economy, there's generally a certain amount of kind of flow through of pilots from the regional to the majors, whether it's FedEx or other majors. So there's a level of turnover that results in us posting and hiring on a somewhat of a regular basis. My feeling is that people are probably going to hunker down a little bit with the market being flooded, and as the industry's slowly regaining momentum. We probably won't hire as many people as we have in the past, at the same rate, just because the flow through, I think, is going to decrease a little bit. But it happens where there's still pilots that leave or go. They still go to other companies. There's still other companies hiring and things like that. So we'll continue to hire as needed. Yeah.
And then, as far as, I know that you mentioned that the schedules haven't, as far as the routes, they haven't changed, but can you just walk us through what maybe a typical schedule looks like for a pilot, and maybe how far in advance they know their schedule? Does that change month to month, or do you have pretty set schedule of flying those routes?
Sure. So our schedules are written 1 month at a time. So for a month what you're flying. We do line bidding, which means that based on seniority, you bid for the schedules that you want. Now, our pilots are flying the same routes on a regular basis, because remember, we direct hire pilots to specific geographic locations. So if you're based out of Idaho Falls, you're flying down to Salt Lake City, or Santa Barbara to Ontario, or whatever. So the routes don't change. The schedules will change a little bit now, particularly in Hawaii, where we have all 50 pilots kind of in one location there. So out there, we've got a morning shift, an afternoon shift, and a night shift. So the morning, up until this point, the morning shift and the morning and afternoon shifts are both passenger operations, and the night shift is cargo. So there's line bidding. So based on seniority, determines what days of the week you fly and which shift you're going to fly as well. One would think that as a junior pilot coming into Ohana, you would fly the night shift. That's not actually the case necessarily.
Everybody wants to serve.
Our senior pilots love flying at night. They're flying cargo. It affords them the opportunity to be at home with the kids sometimes during the day, maybe surfing or doing some of their other activities. So, but the thing is that you'll get an opportunity to fly all of them. You'll fly both the ATR 42 and 72. You generally, I think, get 2 days off per week that are, so you generally fly 4 to 5 days per week, week in and week out. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning is that I told you that our pilots don't accrue hours as quickly as the passenger side of the industry. As a result, we don't pay by hour like the other side of the industry does. Otherwise, our pilots would starve to death. So we pay salary. And now we are at the top of the regional pay scale. So I'd recommend going online and taking a look at that. But the way it works is we pay salary, and that pays for up to 18 days of flying per month. Now, any flying that you do more than that, so on your 19th and 20th days and so forth, you're also compensated for those at the rate of about $200 per day. So there are some opportunities to fly more and sometimes less, depending on where you're at. But that's basically what the schedule looks like, certainly in Hawaii. Now, in our FedEx feeder side, the schedule is really dictated by which base you're at. So in some cases, like in our FedEx feeder network down around Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, they tend to fly at night. So they're conducting FedEx, flights at the kind of in the middle of the night. They come in at 9 or 9:30 at night and are off at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. Other locations all are daytime or evening flights. Sometimes you'll, like up in Missoula, or I think even Idaho Falls, I think Ontario as well. You would come in the evening, fly out to your destination, spend the night in the hotel, hop in the aircraft in the morning, fly it home, and so you basically are off all day. And then you just you do one flight in the evening and another one in the morning. And then up in the Pacific Northwest, up in Spokane and Portland and up in Anchorage, those are all daytime flying. So you come in the morning, 7 o'clock or so, and you're home for dinner. Now for our caravan operations, those are all daytime operations. So again, you come in at 7 or so in the morning and you're done for dinner. You're home for dinner. And our caravan operations, those bases serve a lot more cities. So you're up and hopping into a whole bunch, like Portland and Seattle and Spokane all serve 6 to 8 cities each. So you have an opportunity to do a lot of flying into the surrounding towns and cities there, which is pretty neat as well. But they're all daytime flying. Yeah.
Now, I know that we are approaching an hour, so if you need to go, feel free to let us know. But I do want to get to one more question that I think is important for a lot of our viewers that have mentioned that they are interested in applying in the future, and then we'll get to some viewer Q&A. So with that, the last question that I just wanted to ask before we get into that is, can you talk about the interview process and just give it some insight into what someone that is selected for an interview would typically experience?
Absolutely. So we already talked about the selection process. How we look online, we take the applications. Basically, our hiring team will print off the applications for all of those who meet the initial criteria, right? So you meet the flight hour minimums and the certifications, we'll print you off. And then we start assessing and surveying kind of, who are going to be the final applicants. Once that's selected, we reach out to you. So either me or another member of our hiring team will reach out to you to schedule an interview. It's generally a 2-interview process. So again, we're a small company. It's pretty streamlined, so we take pride in it. The process, unlike some of the big companies here, is quick. You could know within a week or 2 weeks whether or not you're hired. So the interview process entails 2 interviews. The first one is an HR type of interview, generally with me. And it usually lasts an hour to an hour and a half. We get into your background, your qualifications, and a variety of things, and get a feel for who you are as a person and a pilot. And then once I'm complete with that, if it goes well and if you're still interested, because we naturally want to ensure that not only you're a good fit for us, but we're a good fit for you as well. Then we'll schedule you for a follow-on interview with our Part 121 chief pilot. And that will usually be 45 minutes to an hour, and that's a bit more technical. He gets into aircraft systems, and he's gonna ask you judgment and get into your judgment, that kind of thing. But it's never scripted with him. It's based on his assessment of you, your background of experience. Our chief pilot's outstanding. He's flown a ton of aircraft, got a lot of flight hours, a lot of experience around the world. So most of the time, he's flown the aircraft of all of our applicants. So that's pretty neat. Once that's complete, we take our notes, so my notes and his notes, we compile them into the package and we submit them to our hiring committee. So within 1 to 3 business days, generally, they get back to us on which applicants and we will select for hire. And at that point, it's usually me reaching out to those applicants and making an offer at that point. Once an offer is made, generally start about 4 weeks after that offer. Is typically the time. And there's a lot of things that need to happen within those 4 weeks in the onboarding process. You get a pre-employment drug test, some paperwork, you get your records, and we review our training department. Everybody goes page by page through your records, all of that stuff. And then your hire date is the day you get on an airplane to come out here and begin training. And now for our ATRs, it's about 8 weeks of training, so 10 days of in-dock up here at our corporate headquarters in North Idaho. And then 5 to 6 weeks out on Flight Safety International in Houston. After which time you go to your destination, you begin flying the aircraft and working on IOE, which is 25 hours working toward your IOE check flight. Now for the Cessna Caravan, it's about a week and a half of in-dock up here. It's about 10 days up here and about a week and a half down at Flight Safety International in Wichita. So a total of about 3 weeks of training. Then you go to your base or somewhere in our fleet and start accruing hours working toward IOE at that point. So that's kind of a synopsis of the of both the hiring and training process.
Thank you for sharing. I think at this
Absolutely.
time we will take a few of our viewer Q&A, but we won't keep you too long.
Sure.
So Jake would like to know, as a CFI in a leadership position, does that carry maybe more weight in the determination of that quality of flight time? So for example, at all of our training centers, we have lead instructors that have additional responsibilities and oversight.
That is a really good question, Jake, and somewhat insightful, I think, because as you know, as I'm sure all of you know, what's unique about this profession is that you are a lifelong learner, for starters, but you're also a lifelong instructor, right? So being a CFI, whether you're a first officer, a co-pilot building flight time and learning from your captain, right? As a lifelong learner, and you're constantly learning new things, new aircraft, systems, procedures, limitations, how to fly them, building proficiency in the IFR structure and different geographic regions and so forth. Constant learner, right? Well, one of the duties of a captain, obviously, is a lifelong instructor as well, as being a lifelong learner. So instruction is really a thread that runs from beginning to end in this profession, right? It's inherent in what we do. So being a CFI and building those skills, learning to instruct, CRM, gaining proficiency at CRM. We know that with CRM, there are various ways to communicate effectively to our crew, to the other pilot or members of our crew. So, and it's not the same for everybody. So developing those skills is really important. Yes, if you're a CFI, obviously the majority of people are CFIs. Some people are also CFIIs. That's all very valuable experience. And ultimately, not only do we pay attention to it, but it also makes you more insightful. So, I think as a real professional, you tend to be introspective, right? You say, how can I do things better? And you start to look at a problem, if you will, at a variety of different perspectives. Now, as instructors, I think we tend to do that more because we want to be as effective as possible and communicate well and improve the way that we instruct or communicate or operate our crew. So kind of in the end, when you go through the application and interview process, how you answer questions oftentimes is a result of your experience and your insight and being introspective as an instructor and that kind of thing. So, I know that's kind of a long question, but but it emphasizes the importance of being kind of a lifelong instructor and a lifelong learner. And there's a lot of experience and insight to be gained, and looking at things holistically. I get a lot of applicants who, during the interview process, answer things very two-dimensionally or one-dimensionally. They'll recite something, a definition or kind of a textbook answer to something. But in reality, what I'm looking for is more of a three-dimensional answer, something insightful about how they interact with the crews, or the emphasis of, the responsibilities as a first officer or a captain, or, and things like that. And so, being an instructor, you gain some of that insight, I think.
Thank you. Sean would like to know, do pilots in Hawaii, is there COLA for cost of living adjustment for pilots in Hawaii?
There is not. That's a good question. And this kind of brings up a little bit of a sore spot with me. Now, The cost of living in Hawaii is expensive. This is one of the unique, so not only is it geographically remote, 2,500 nautical miles, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the cost of living is also about seven times the national average, right? So now if you're living in Seattle or Anchorage or Santa Barbara or some other place, San Francisco or something, you're probably accustomed to the high cost of living, and you know what I'm talking about. But now we pay at the top of the regional pay scale, but it's still expensive out there. With the situation being as it is, the market being flooded with qualified pilots, unfortunately, our contract no longer offers there used to be a sign-on bonus, a $5,000 sign-on bonus, and a $12,000 per year retention bonus. And for now, that has been rescinded, unfortunately. And so I anticipate that as things level off, that those will come back. But for the time being, it's just the base pay. Those bonuses used to help with moving out there. The retention bonus, obviously, an additional $1,000 per month is helpful when you live in a high, an expensive location. But I always emphasize that, when you're considering a position in Hawaii, crunch the numbers. Get on Zillow or Redfin or one of those and look out there at the cost of living, at the cost to rent a place on Oahu, and you look up the cost of living and crunch the numbers to make sure that it's suitable for you, that can facilitate your lifestyle, your family, your personal circumstances.
Good point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a lot of applicants that are from there originally and wanting to go back home. So
there are, yeah. But the majority are actually from the mainland. Oh. Now we do assist as pilots go out there. We put you up in a hotel for a week and give you a rental car for a week. And we put you in contact with some of our other pilots and employees to help you get settled. So you're not alone and unafraid out there. It's, we try to help you and assist you to a certain degree, but it's still a big move.
Nick, go ahead and let me know if, I think we discussed this question before, but let me make sure that you'd asked before just the pathway from 135 to 121 and how does that transition work? And I think you talked about that when you were talking about some of the training at flight safety, but for someone who maybe got hired on the lower 1200 end and then didn't have their ATP to be able to maybe transition to the ATRs.
Sure, yeah. Now the beauty of coming on as a Part 135 pilot with us is that first off, the minimums are 1,200 hours, right, total time, plus the other requisite hours. So slightly lower hourly threshold to get hired. But the beauty is that when you come on with us that way, you build a reputation with us. So we have a whole lot of guys pilots who transition from flying the Cessna Caravan to the ATR. So that is absolutely a route. Now it is a little bit longer route because you come in, we're going to have you fly with us for generally, I think, 18 months minimum prior to transitioning to the ATR. So depending on where you stand in your hours and what your long-term goals are, that may draw out your timeline a little bit, but it's absolutely a great option. If that's something that interests you, you come in, build a reputation with us, gain some experience, you learn FedEx feeder operations and all that stuff. You're still required to have the 50 hours of multi-engine time. We can't provide you, at this time, we can't provide you with that, unfortunately. But once you gain that and you pass those 18 months and you have your other flight hour minimums, at that point, if you want to upgrade to the ATR, if you consider it an upgrade, or transition to the ATR, then that's absolutely something that we consider. And we prefer hiring from within. So whenever a position opens, if we have an internal employee that either wants to change geographic locations or transition from the Caravan to the ATR, we give them first dibs.
And I have a couple more and then we'll get her wrapped up. So this is let's see. Someone asked about expanding operations to California. You do have a base there right now. That is Santa Barbara, correct?
Santa Barbara is our only base there currently. So ultimately, it depends on where FedEx needs operators. Now, I mentioned that we are the largest FedEx feeder and we cover the western half of the U.S., but we are not. There are also some smaller FedEx feeders within our region. So there's probably I think there's a graphic out there, probably through FedEx, that shows where the various FedEx feeders are located, and it shows where their headquarters are. So you can look up some of the other FedEx feeder operators. They operate in Hawaii. There's, or excuse me, not in Hawaii. Yeah, there's one in Hawaii, one out in Montana, Colorado, Southern California as well, or actually I think throughout California. And I think they fly caravans. So they all vary slightly, but take a look at those as well. Those are options too.
And Jake, this is another one from Jake. He's one of our flight instructors in Fort Lauderdale. He asked if someone who will likely meet ATP minimums as an instructor, do you have any really insights and preferences, recommendations to make his resume stand out as a more qualified pilot in the market? So maybe either, even if it's completing its ATP or getting its ATP completed, other recommendations?
Yeah, no, I really don't. Other than what we've already talked about with regards to meeting the hourly minimums, having the ATPs is huge because this is one less thing that we have to worry about as a company. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an edge potentially. Some of the aviation background, but no, I don't think I have anything. I say when you submit an application, have submit a nice clean resume with it, attach a resume with it so we can take a look over that. Be thorough in your resume. One of the things that I think is really important is that a lot of people are afraid to be honest and forthright about maybe some of their training failures and things like that, because they're afraid that it'll bump them out of the running for a position. It's important to emphasize that you have to be 100% honest. That we get PREA paperwork, which is your employer aviation paperwork. We also get all of your FAA records, and our training department goes through your records page by page, and we look at everything. So we will know everything. And unfortunately, we've hired a few pilots in the past who were not forthright, and they began training or were about to begin training, and our training department discovered that they had things in their record that they hadn't disclosed, and so we fired them. And it's really unfortunate because it's not always, we wouldn't necessarily have disqualified them. We may very well have still hired them, but obviously integrity is essential. And if you don't have integrity, there's no place for you in our company or others. So the last thing you want to do is not be forthright and honest and have that happen, because now that's part of your employment records as well. We do a 10-year background check on all employees, as most companies do. And we will know that you started and began, and you were hired and fired by a company. So things like that stand out as well. And so you'll have to answer to it in the long run. So I know this was not exactly aligned with Jake's question, but one thing that I wanted to point out is just be honest. There are benefits to be gained from having failed, to be honest with you. There are lessons to be learned, and it makes you a more humble pilot and understanding and potentially a better instructor and things like that. So don't be afraid of that.
Great advice. Okay, two more questions, and we'll let you go. So Frederick wanted to know just about the ATRs and the caravans. Are they six-pack, steam gauges, or are they glass cockpit?
They are a combination of both. I think our ATRs, so we have different models of ATRs, whether you're in the FedEx feeder network or our Ohana network. I think on our FedEx feeder side, they tend to be predominantly steam gauges. There are some MFDs there. I can't tell you exactly who makes them, Honeywell, or I think we use a variety of different companies. Now, we use in our Cessna Caravans predominantly Garmin products. So I think predominantly Garmin 1000s, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a combination. And to be honest with you, we'd like to see that pilots have the ability to fly both steam gauges and glass. Sometimes applicants are somewhat handicapped because they've only done one or the other. We know that the glass is very handy and it's nice to be proficient on. But the level of proficiency gained by steam gauges is somewhat different, and it's good to have both of those or be able to fly on both of those, ideally.
And our last question, Zach, I'll answer this, and then I'll let Josh answer his feedback as well. But he's just asking, he's thinking about making the career change to becoming a pilot. Depending on if you didn't hear before, we were talking a little bit about the industry, and cargo is still booming. So right. Beyond that, we're starting to see the numbers increase for TSA, and And if you start right now, by the time that you finish training and reach your hours, the industry will be in a different place. Coming from someone who completed training back in 2008, recovery is going to happen. And I'll let Josh give his feedback.
Exactly. No, I think you said it perfectly. So, that's a really good point, that depending on where you're at, the after effects of this crisis may have completely recovered by the time you're ready to be hired. So keep plugging away, keep making those good decisions. And not only that, but aviation is special. I know firsthand, my heart used to ache when I would see airplanes. I literally never wanted anything more. And I feel very, very happy and content that I pursued that path, and I got to kind of live my dreams as a military pilot. So I know what it feels like to have a passion for aviation. My feeling is that sometimes it's easy to be discouraged. It certainly was for me at times. But if you stick with it, chances are you're not going to regret it. It's obviously it's an amazing thing, and there are the lifestyle is unique, the potential to see the world. There are just so many benefits. Even the way we're talking about being a lifelong learner. It really, when you're constant, it's sort of a continuous academic environment. That in itself makes you sharp and kind of more worldly and more academic, in your attitude toward life. So I mean, there's so many positive things about the aviation industry. My the key point would be, don't give up. If this is your passion, stick with it. We're going to be hiring for a long time, regardless of what the economy is doing or crises that occur. We're still going to need pilots. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, on that, I think that we have gone about 20 minutes over. So thank you for sticking with us and answering all of these questions. And
Absolutely.
I just want to say we're so grateful that you were able to join us today and to share your insight and expertise and career opportunities at Empire. So on behalf of all our viewers, thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Great questions, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I look forward to talking to you all again.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. And for our viewers, if you have more information or would like more information, you can go to empireairlines.com and do that. And as Josh said, there is an employment email address on there. So if you have questions, you can submit them that way. And you're very welcome to buy us. And so stay tuned for future webinars. You can visit atpflightschool.com/webinar. And everyone, hope you have a great weekend and fly safe. Thank you.